Welcome to Touched and Empowered, a show created to empower individuals to value their lives by hosting think tank discussions that will inspire positive action. Touched and Empowered with Katie and Ace starts now. Welcome to this episode of Touched and Empowered. I am excited to announce our guest today, who is Amy Todisco. She is a small town activist and a nationally recognized leader in detoxifying homes and lifestyles. She is a longtime green living expert and mentor, a transformational coach, and a retreat leader. Amy guides people towards less toxic and more eco-friendly lives, particularly around food and household product choices. This is done through private mentoring and workshops. Amy lives on an organic farm in Vermont, where she also leads wellness retreats, unique food and farm tours, and holds multiple workshops. Well, thank you for coming, Amy. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you guys.
So I'm excited about the fact that you have taken on this whole eco-friendly living.
Yes.
I have friends who are very sensitive to chemical products and have gone the way of all natural ingredients. But somebody who doesn't have that kind of sensitivity, I never
Yes.
thought that that would be something that's important, but I realized that it's more important than I thought. Do you want to share why that is?
Absolutely. Yes. So let me just back up a tiny bit just to kind of let you know how I discovered this.
Okay.
And when I was 16, I was working in a health food store in New York City where I grew up. And I started to become aware of organic food and a little bit about household products, but more around supplements, herbs, that kind of thing. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, 13 years after that, I came across this little book called The Non-Toxic Baby in one of the many health food stores that I was shopping in. And I was shocked to find out that there were all these toxic chemicals legally allowed in everything that we use in our homes, pretty much, whether it's shampoo, carpeting, paints, cleaning products, you name it. They're just loaded with this toxic synthetic stuff. And most of the reason is because those ingredients are cheap, as opposed to finding the higher quality, more herbal based, like Castile soap, for example, made out of vegetable oils, is more expensive to produce than, some kind of mainstream brand of soap. But what you said is really important. The people that are sensitive, chemically sensitive, are more like the canaries in the coal mine for us.
Right.
And all of us are being impacted. It's just that those folks that are reacting tend to have had so much of an accumulation of toxins in their system that that's when symptoms start to present. So we might be really annoyed, or I'll speak for myself. I'll be in a public place, and if somebody's got cologne or perfume on them, oh, that is so strong.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily react in a physical sense. I don't break out into a rash. I don't have trouble breathing, but I'm just kind of annoyed by the scent, and it feels really overwhelming. Or a plug-in, for example. That's one of the worst things. If I go into someone's bathroom and there's a brand name plug-in and all this scent is filling the space, I'm just kind of overwhelmed. And of course, a little bit of information is dangerous because I know that stuff is not good to breathe, and it can cause all kinds of different health impacts. So looking at this question, it's the reason I find it so important is that we have control over a lot of these. We don't necessarily control what's outside of our homes and offices, but we do have control over what we bring in. So if we learn, hey, those plugins are really nasty and are not going to be, good for our health, much less our pets and children, then we have something we can do. And I like to feel like we have power over our circumstances so that we're not just, being vulnerable to whatever's happening around us.
Which I think is the most important thing when it comes to anyone's individual personal space, is
Correct.
we want to be able to have that feeling of control because there's so much in our lives that we can't control.
Exactly.
So I really like the idea how you talk about, cleaning this energy, not only energetic, but our actual space by
Yes.
using things that are overall healthy for us, even if we didn't think about that beforehand.
Right. And actually, you just touched on something that I think is also equally important, the energetics of the space, right? So I'm a big proponent of saging, or if you don't like the smell of burning sage, you can actually make a little aerosol with water and sage oil and spritz your environment and still clear it of, energy that you don't want in there anymore. And I find that even if it's just placebo, it feels really good.
Yeah, I actually made a sage spray and sent it to my sister when she bought her first house.
No kidding.
So,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
I used to make them and sell them too. Oh, that's awesome.
That's amazing.
So when it comes to all of these products that are out there, that marketing messages saying you have to buy, you have to buy, you have to buy,
Yes.
what is an easy alternative, that's something simple that someone might be able to replace with what they already have in their house without having to go buy new stuff?
Okay. So that's a great question. And it's actually a simpler and oftentimes can be cheaper because you don't really need a unique product for everything that you're cleaning. So for example, I'll clean the toilet with just Castile soap, which I'm using to bathe with anyway. And maybe if there's, a little bit of iron residue or something, because we have well water, I'll use Bon Ami, that little cleanser that has the baby chick on it, and a scrub brush, and that cleans it great. So I don't need like the blue stuff or any of the strong smelling kinds of things. And then just sort of getting back to that plug-in, I love beeswax candles. And you can get beeswax or soy candles that are scented with pure essential oils if you like the idea of putting some kind of scent into your space. Beeswax is also a much longer, cleaner burning candle. So you don't get the kind of, if you're burning a regular paraffin wax, it'll have that black quality to it, which does get into the air, and paraffin is made out of a petroleum based. So beeswax is, a wonderful thing that is used, or once the honey is harvested, beeswax is essentially a byproduct of that. So that's one thing. And then potpourri, like if you like to grow fragrant flowers in the summer, like lavender or rose or even chamomile, you can dry them and put them in a little bowl inside your home, in different spaces to make that scent. In fact, I have in my car, in the cup holder, I have some lavender flowers that are from last season. So every time I put a cup into that holder, it'll crush those up a little bit and I'll get a little whiff of lavender, which is kind of neat.
Oh, that's such a
lovely.
great idea on doing that.
Thanks.
But something that you interact with.
Yeah.
And getting in and out of a vehicle or in and out of a room.
Yep, exactly.
Brighten up the room and brighten up the space with a fragrance, because sense of smell is really important, I've been learning.
Absolutely.
Out of curiosity, so with this wellness lifestyle, how do you implement that into your retreats? Like, how does the everyday go, and what can people expect when they join?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned in the intro that I live on this organic farm in Vermont. And so the retreat is based here. The lodging will hopefully be next door at this next door inn, but any of the inns in this town that we live in are really quite lovely. And so our focus will be partly on gardening and learning about, sustainable food. How is it grown? How is it different than conventional? And I'll just give you one quick little key. Really good food is based on living soil. So what that means is you want to have these microorganisms in your soil that are helping break down the organic matter, which then feeds the plants that you're intending to grow, versus regular, conventional farms. That's really just dirt, not soil. There's not much living in there because it's been doused with so many chemicals, whether they're fertilizers or herbicides to kill the weeds, that there's none of those healthy living organisms in there. And a really fun fact that I love to share with retreat goers or even tour guests is, if you are putting your hands in the soil and you're working the soil and you're actually breathing a little bit of that soil, there's a serotonin response in the brain. So it's like a happy chemical. So you get that extra added boost of, feeling good, besides just being out in the fresh air, sunshine, and, putting your hands in the dirt.
Oh, interesting.
So the focus of the retreat will be gardening, but it's all kinds of different things. We do an herbal experience. So we learn about medicinal herbs. We learn about healthy food. We even have a pizza oven so we can make our own pizza. All the meals will be made by a chef that, harvests a lot of our produce. And one of the signature experiences of this retreat that is so cool is this life coaching experience with horses. And I used to have horses for about 17 years and have always loved them. And what I found at some point was when you're interacting with a horse, the horse is kind of like a mirror to us in that their whole survival is based on understanding what's going on with those around them. And we're essentially predators to horses, right? Because we could kill them, sadly. And so they're reading everything to make sure that they stay safe. And so what happens when we interact with them is that whatever's going on with us, they pick up on it. They can even detect your blood pressure changes and, respiration. And I swear they can practically read your thoughts. And I'll tell you a personal experience that will illuminate that. So years ago, my daughter had a life-threatening experience that was quite terrifying, and she's fine today. But I had just come back from dealing with this experience and hospital stays and this and that, and I was pretty stressed out. And so I was doing a session with a friend of mine who's also a coach, and she had some horses that we could work with. And so I was working with this one big white horse named Freedom. And what I was going to do was go inside this circular space that's called a round pen. And I was going to, interact with this horse in the round pen. And as I looked inside, I saw him running around like a crazy horse. And he was just terrifying, actually, because he was big. And I thought, even with my horse savvy, I don't feel comfortable going in there. So my friend Janice said, okay, why don't you turn around and let's just chat for a minute. And so we very briefly talked a little bit about what was going on in my head at that moment. And I did some deep breathing exercises. And then I turned around and the horse was just standing there looking at me. And he was like a totally different creature. And so I thought, okay, I think I can get in there now. I walk in, he comes over, lets me pet him. And then he follows me around and then lies down on the ground and shows me his belly, which is a total sign of vulnerability. Right. And I just thought, I knew the power of this work, but to see it happen for myself and to see such incredible transformation with just 5 minutes, it was remarkable. So that was one experience. And I've had, therapists come through the retreats telling me that they learned more about themselves in these encounters with the horses than in years of therapy, because we can only learn so much from talk therapy. And, there's another level that we get when we work with animals.
Yeah, I mean, horses are amazing creatures to begin with, but
Yeah.
I've spoken to many people who use animals as part of their coaching.
Oh, no kidding.
Especially for therapeutic healing.
Yes.
I've
Yes.
one friend who's a grief counselor whose dog goes with her everywhere she goes.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's amazing how much just the comfort of the animal
yes
helps ease whatever emotions we're going through, whether they
Absolutely.
be sad or excited or
yeah. And I think that's particularly true of dogs because they have such unconditional love. They're just amazing beings, and they're so used to us humans that they've really learned a lot about how we function so they can integrate themselves in more easily perhaps than other creatures.
But that's amazing that you're able to tie in that kind of animal nurture with the actual nature nurture that you're doing with the wellness and the green living and detoxifying our individual selves when people are coming to your retreats.
Right. And then another feature, just thinking about the nature piece, is we take these mindful walks in the woods or, around the river. And often we do it in silence, and we'll bring a little notebook and jot down different things that pop in. So I usually tell people when you take a walk in nature, see if you can put yourself in the perspective of a young child that has never been there before, that this is all new, and see what you will notice that you might not have noticed if you're just taking it for granted. And it's kind of cool. I mean, I do that a lot. And my partner, Dave, and I, whenever we go any place new, we're always like, oh, wow, look at that. Look at that. So, we get that whole childlike piece because it makes it so much more interesting and more fun. So that's another
I think
feature.
Having a sense of wonder around, what's going on immediately around you, and then what's going out 5 feet from you, and then 10 feet from you. And
absolutely,
it's amazing what we don't see in our worlds until we open up this idea of being in wonder.
Absolutely. Thinking about what we don't see reminds me of, I don't know if it was a study, but I remember this fact that when people are hypnotized to try to, let's say they've witnessed a crime, for example, when they are hypnotized, they remember so many more details that the conscious mind has forgotten, whether it's a license plate or, specific details about a person. They had a tattoo on the side of their face that they didn't notice necessarily when they were just thinking about it. And it makes me think about how much we miss in day-to-day life, if we're just focused, even taking a walk and we're in our head the whole time, thinking about, what the next thing we have to do for work or something, somebody said to us. But if we actually stop and look at, oh, wow, that's a really cool bird, or did you hear that sound? Or, just all these different ways to tune into the moment. It's so much more healing that way.
So do you have a tidbit of information on how someone might be able to practice that on an everyday basis?
Yeah, I do. So one really good way of doing that is when you're eating. I remember taking a personal growth seminar way back when I was 13, and we had this exercise we did where we got a fresh strawberry, and we were supposed to eat that strawberry as though we'd never had one before. And so you bring it to your nose and you smell the scent and you touch it with your tongue and you feel the sensation of those little, seeds on the berry. And is it warm? Is it cool? And then you take a tiny bite and you just really pay attention to what the flavor is. And that was the best strawberry I think I've ever eaten when I did it that way. It was really cool. It'd be tough to do a whole meal that way, but you can certainly start your meal that way.
Especially if you're hungry. Yeah.
Yes,
I like the idea of bringing in all of the senses because we absorb so much information through our eyes because that's what we learn how to read, we learn how to interpret pictures, we look around and see everything around us. But we pick up so much more from our other senses too that we don't recognize. So I like the idea of doing this kind of an exercise that we can do in our own home next time we sit down for breakfast or dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
And just test it out to see what we notice different, especially if we're eating like our favorite meal.
Yes.
I think, what do you notice that's different the next time you have your favorite meal?
Right.
I think would be lots of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very lovely. I think it's interesting. So I have 7 nieces and 1 nephew.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 sisters. We tend to grow. And what I recognized is as my nieces were getting older and growing up, they started having all these allergies. Like they were having eczema. They most likely they started getting these bracelets that basically said the different allergies that they have.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more common amongst the next generation of kids that are like 12 years or younger.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I haven't seen those bracelets before.
Yeah, and what I'm noticing is, like, as you were saying, the toxification of certain chemicals or household items definitely attributed to it. And I can definitely sense it. Even as I got older, I actually got psoriasis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's fun. And do you feel that the retreat is one way to absolutely like clear those toxins from your everyday, like, or at least clear it for the time being?
Right. And get more awareness about what you can do when you go home.
Exactly. What's another fun tip for people? Well, saying fun, but I'm saying also safely fun. What's another great tip for people that are sensitive with those allergies to help clear their home of any toxins that could be increasing their irritability?
Yeah. So usually what I start with is food, but I'm going to actually sidestep for a second to whatever you're doing, whatever you're washing your clothes and your bedding in is incredibly important because you're being exposed to that 24/7. And I find even when I walk by my neighbors' houses, I can tell when they're doing laundry because I can smell that strong stuff coming out of the vent, right? So switching to a different laundry product, and the one I'm using currently, I like, although I'm going to get the unscented version because even the scented one is too strong, and it's called Clean People. I think it's a very good product. But again, if you have sensitivities, I would definitely go with the unscented. But yeah, that's one really important thing because, especially when you think about children and babies, if they're smelling that all the time, and I have a little tiny dog that sleeps under the covers. So she's breathing whatever's in that detergent. So that's a really important one. But I think one of the key things is really the food, and, the whole Hippocrates, food is thy medicine. I feel like that couldn't be more true. And when we look at what's happened, particularly in the United States, and, the typical American diet, and then also the disease rates that have skyrocketed, it's very clear, I think, to a lot of experts and others that what we're eating has a direct impact on whether we're getting the nutrients that our bodies need to heal. And I am definitely somebody who believes that, we were designed to be self-healing. And so if we give ourselves the right nutrients and things that we need, then it makes our bodies function more efficiently. We can heal and prevent illness much better. I thankfully don't have to take any pharmaceutical medicines, and, not that I have anything wrong with people that do it. Some of them are life-saving, but I feel like if I can avoid that hamster wheel of pharmaceuticals and Western medicine interventions, then I'm much happier and healthier.
Well, I like
And
I like the idea of the body being able to heal itself. I mean, I know the mind is an amazing tool, muscle component of the human body, because we can train our brain to do so many different things, including heal.
Yes.
Past traumas and events from our past.
Right.
So the idea that the rest of our body could do healing as well, I think is just an added bonus. We just have to be, I think, open to the idea that our bodies are just these amazing machines created by the divine and do amazing things.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the areas that I try to focus on is if I start to have some kind of a symptom, my immediate thinking goes to, I wonder what could be causing that. And so I start looking at, have I done anything differently recently? Have I, let's say I have a stomach upset and I think about, okay, what did I just have to eat in the last 24 hours? Could that be a reason? Or, is there something that maybe it's sort of a mental thought that keeps reoccurring? Like maybe I'm in fear a lot, and so therefore that's going to impact my digestive system, even if it's nothing that I've eaten. It could just be that I'm in, fight or flight too much. So I'm really always looking at that question of like, let's see if I can figure out what the cause of this is so I can get rid of it or change it or what have you. So I don't need to try to take something to mask it or to, simply get rid of the symptom. Because it's like I think of it as like the warning lights that come on in our car, right? We can turn those off, but that's not going to be a good thing for us.
That doesn't take care of the underlying issue.
Exactly. Still left inside the oil tank. It's like, oh, that's not going to be good if we shut that off.
That's fine. Oh, it's interesting because when we think about diving deeper into ourselves and understanding, like, what is the thing that's different in the routine that's causing this effect? I think that's also a really important part of the reflection process from what happened through COVID, through the pandemic. It's like, what were the small things that we were poisoning ourselves with? How can we reverse that?
Yes.
And right? And it's like, it was to the point where it was so much that we didn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing is doing such a great service for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely coming from a person who experienced the toxins and then the later effect. I think all of us should be more reflective on those things as well. And your retreat space, the things that you do, especially with the horses stuff.
Yeah.
It's a great place to start.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and I have easy things. Like I have an ebook that's free on my website, that people can check out because it's got the top 3 things that I usually start people with. And then there's a couple of other low-cost ebooks. One's on organic food on a budget. Basically, it's frugal foodie. And then the other one is about how to decipher food labels, because actually I learned a lot as I researched more about those food labels. I was blown away that, when it says wild caught, for example, on your tuna fish, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Or if it says antibiotic free, or, there's all kinds of label claims that are meaningless. And then there's some that really are important, like certified organic means something. Not as much, I think, as it once did before the USDA got involved in the certifying of organic. But so that was even interesting for me. And I feel like, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and yet I'm still learning new things. I, try to buy from companies that started out as independent, and then once they've been purchased by a corporation, then I got to look at the ingredients again and think, did they change anything since when they first started? Is there an alternative here that I might prefer? So it's always new information. And of course, we see how much conflicting and overwhelming information there is. 1 minute eggs are bad for us. No, eggs are good. Butter's bad. No, it's like, how does anybody keep up? If it's not their passion, it can be very time consuming and overwhelming to look into all of that.
Well,
which is why I try to simplify it.
And I think it also ties back to the whole, if you're eating it and your body feels good,
yes, that's a key.
Then it's a good thing for you. That
Absolutely
doesn't mean eat it 24/7.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point, because sometimes people make decisions because, and I have no problem with people being vegan. I totally get that. I struggle with the whole idea of eating animals, and so I'm very picky about the ones that I choose. So I'll eat grass-fed, grass-finished beef, for example. But I feel like there is no one size fits all. Everybody's physiology is different. And I have learned, since I took this metabolic typing diet thing years ago, and I realized, oh, no wonder I like, eating a grass-fed steak and salad. That's my favorite meal. I am a protein and high fat based physiology, whereas, I'm better off when I eat fewer carbs. So I think it's important to understand, what does our body need, and not necessarily follow, all these different experts telling us which things we should be doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm living the land of LA. So so people are like, let's go vegan, let's do this. And I went vegan for 2.5 years. I'm Filipino. And our diet is predominantly meat.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah. The problem with that is, what's in the meat?
Yes, that is a very good question.
Yeah. So that was something that I was learning. And I thought I was like bitten by a Lone Star tick or something, because I was like bleeding through orifices at one point.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. It was awesome.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to know what the Lone Star tick is, you can Google it. It's like a tick that makes you allergic to meat. Then I went to the Philippines and I ate meat there, and that was pure organic, not manufactured, not on these assembly lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
not factory farmed, filled with antibiotics and all that other junk. Yeah. Oh, wow.
All this. Yeah. No, it's not McDonald's.
Right.
You probably saw the chicken cross the street before you ate it. Like that was right. So
you had good food.
I had really good food. And then when I was thinking about it, like, if you ever research just not you predominantly, I know you have, but for people listening, if you do research the way that meat is manufactured here, it's absolutely terrifying. And I don't blame people for going vegan for that reason.
I don't either, because if you watch any of those documentaries, it is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. And so I feel I'm very grateful that I live in Vermont, because I choose, meat that's raised in Vermont predominantly. I mean, there are some other good farms out there that I know are selling online. There's a really cool, if I can come up with a name, I think White Oak. I'm not sure. There's a guy that does regenerative agriculture and incredible. I've heard him interviewed numerous times. I would buy his meat for sure if I couldn't get stuff locally. I can find that link for you guys if you want to put it in the show notes or something. That would be
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. And I've heard Butcher Box, I've heard good things about. I haven't tried it, but I've heard good things about their quality of meat.
Oh, that's so helpful.
I
That is
really
so
think it's all
helpful.
about do the research as to what's best for your area.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
that's true.
we can order stuff online, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be from the same state. It could be coming from
Exactly. If you
across the
can get it
country.
locally, that's definitely the ideal.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
obviously it doesn't have to be shipped from a distance and all. One thing you said too about going to the Philippines and the food differences made me think of the fact that I know people that are gluten intolerant and yet they eat wheat when they're in Europe and they have no problem. And then
Yes.
you think about like the original wheat is totally different than what wheat we have today. And here's a scary thing for conventional wheat that I learned not too long ago, but they actually, in addition to spraying the wheat with herbicides, right, while it's growing, right before they harvest conventional wheat, depending on where they're growing it, they will spray it again with glyphosate, which is one of the most toxic herbicides, because it dries the wheat and it makes it easier to harvest the kernels out of it. So you're just getting this fresh dose of glyphosate on that wheat. And I'm believing that glyphosate probably has something to do with the gluten allergies. I can't say for a fact, but I've seen, studies that are indicating that there's a connection.
That makes a lot of sense because it was funny. I love pasta. Love pasta. Lived in New York City, you
Yeah.
know, really enjoyed all the types of gluten. When I came to California, I want to say about 4 years ago, I started getting psoriasis from the gluten,
Oh, interesting.
right?
But you didn't have it in New York.
I didn't have it in New York. I don't
Huh.
know, maybe it was the water or maybe it was the specific grain that was going to New York City.
Yeah.
I did here and there in New York, but not as badly as I did in California.
So
And when I went to the Philippines, no issue. I know we mainly ate rice, but no issue.
yeah.
When I went to Europe and I would eat their pasta, no issue. So it
Wow.
definitely has something to do with the agriculture in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of interesting that we have in Mexico, I think the ruler, what is the president? I think they have a president in Mexico, right? He has banned GMOs into Mexico. And our country is fighting that ban because they want to be able to, export our GMO laden stuff. And I just think that that's incredible that, a country that doesn't want that toxin is being fought to include it into their imports. I mean, we tried to get it labeled in this country and we were so close, but then at the last minute, we weren't allowed to know. But now they actually do, they call it bioengineered. If you look on like
Oh,
cans of
wow.
soup or whatever, you'll see, bioengineered. So it's now at least fairly prevalent on labels.
It's amazing because to be very fair, like a good portion of our health and like feeling disempowered. Imagine you're eating something and it's making you feel weaker and weaker and you don't know why, and then your discernment
Exactly.
decreases and like no wonder people don't feel when people don't feel I'm sorry. I no wonder people feel disempowered
Yes.
Right.
because of we're also chemically disempowering ourselves.
Yeah.
So how to yeah,
Very
in
good
the right? Thank you. Yeah. Yes, allies here. But in the reaffirmation of understanding like food, nutrition, being able to create that sustainable, safe space, I think is so important.
Yeah, and it's interesting too when you think about it, when somebody's feeling a symptom, they don't necessarily track it back to what they've eaten or even
Right.
anything that they're using in their home because that's not how we've been trained. You know,
Yeah.
Right.
usually we think of, oh, there's all these germs out there and that's what's going to infect us. But, if we're exposed to enough things and we have a healthy system, we build a tolerance to it. We build immunity towards it. I think that gets back to the whole, our bodies really are designed to heal. So,
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. The information that you have shared has been eye-opening and insightful. And I
oh,
love the
good.
fact of all the tips that you provided to our listeners. So then that way they know that they can start with something small, start with something simple,
Exactly. Yeah.
and be able to move forward in improving just one little thing at a time and then being able to reap all of the benefits from it.
Exactly. And I definitely think that progress is much more important than perfection. I don't do everything perfectly. I know a lot. You still have to live in this world. I still like to eat over at friends' houses, and I just do a little blessing that everything is non-toxic and healthy, and you have to sort of balance things. So I think that's important too, because I think people can start to feel like, oh, I don't really want to know about that because then I got to change everything. It's going to be too expensive or too time consuming or whatever, but it really doesn't have to be.
Thank you. Yeah, that habit right there, though, like, I don't want to know because then I'd have to change everything. I'm like, human beings, that is a common tendency. Yet
Yes,
if
we
it's
have a
something
resistance to change.
right, and I'm like, it's sometimes the change is good for you. I promise. I promise.
Absolutely. Many times the change is good. Yeah, we get
Right,
so stuck in our ways, I think, sometimes.
especially when presented at the time that you don't want it to be presented. But
Mhm.
hey, folks,
Yep.
there's a reason for it, and I think once we feel better towards the end of that, that's really important. And
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us today. I know that are we coming up on time, Katie?
Yes, we are coming up on time.
Oh, I can feel it. I can sense it. But it was such, these nuggets are so juicy and so appreciated. I absolutely love what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that you joined us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
So for
With that,
thank you for listening
yeah,
and being a part of our tribe and part of our group and learning new and exciting things on how we can better take care of ourselves.
thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful week. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope that the discussion today will inspire you to take positive action in your life. Until next week, be empowered.